Crimea oil depot engulfed in flames after drone attack. Sevastopol's petroleum depot caught fire at an unprecedented rate. 14 hours later, i.e. at 6 p.m. local time or 10 p.m. Vietnam time, the fire is still raging. This development is assessed by many observers as it foretells the imminent Ukrainian general counterattack. According to preliminary information, the fire was hit by a drone, said Mikhail Razvozhev, the governor of Russian-made Crimea. Hours later, he said there were 2 attack drones, not 1. He said the fire spread over an area of several thousand square meters, and confirmed this was a Category 4 fire, the highest level according to the Russian classification. Newsweek ran an article titled "Crimea Oil Depot Engulfed in Fire After Drone Attack," which means, Crimea Oil Depot engulfed in flames after drone attack. Dramatic video shows a fuel tank on fire in the Crimean port city of Sevastopol as a result of a suspected drone attack. The peninsula annexed by Russia in 2014 has suffered numerous attacks since the beginning of Moscow's full-scale invasion of Ukraine last year, which Moscow blames on Kyiv. Clips shared on social media on Saturday showed flames engulfing the facility in the Kazakya Bay district and smoke rising into the sky. By morning, the column of smoke was still rising to cover the city. The Moscow-appointed governor of Crimea, Mikhail Razvozhev, said on his Telegram account that preliminary information indicates that 2 drones caused the fire. TASS news agency reported it submerged about 21,500 square feet or 6,553 square meters. There were 60 firefighters trying to get the blaze under control, which Razvozhev said was brought under control but would not be fully extinguished until 6 p.m. local time, about 14 hours after it started. The governor added that no one was injured and there would be no evacuation of nearby residents. He reassured the public by saying that the fire would not affect the fuel supply situation in Sevastopol, adding, "I want to emphasize again, the main thing is that no one was injured. As for the rest, we'll find a way." Over the past 6 months, there have been frequent reports of fires and attacks on Russian-invaded Crimea and Sevastopol, the largest city and main naval base of Russia's Black Sea Fleet. Ukraine has repeatedly said it intends to retake the peninsula as part of its goal of countering Russian aggression. The Ukrainian armed forces, which Newsweek has contacted, did not comment on the latest fire, but Ukrainian social media users reveled in the reported attack. The nights in Ukraine can be a bit chilly in the spring, so the Ukrainian armed forces generously kept the Russian invaders warm in the invaded Sevastopol, said an account called Operation Starry Sky, of a Ukrainian National Guard, wrote on Twitter. "Nothing brings me more joy on a weekend morning than burning fires at Russian aggressor bases in temporarily invaded Crimea. These attacks are the funniest," tweeted Maria Drutska. Is this the time to officially start the spring counterattack of Ukraine to liberate Crimea from fascist Russia? Igor Sushko, a Ukrainian racing driver, tweeted. The incident comes a day after Russian rockets hit residential areas in Ukraine, killing 25 people. In these attacks, a building hit by rockets in Uman, in the Cherkasy region, suffered the heaviest casualties, with at least 23 people lost their lives. After the attacks, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky called on Kyiv's allies to provide better air defenses, including fighter jets, to ensure the security of our cities and villages, both at the rear and on the front lines. Sevastopol, on the Crimean peninsula that Russia annexed from Ukraine in 2014, has been subjected to repeated airstrikes since Russia's all-out invasion of the neighboring country in February 2022. Russian officials blame it for attacks for Ukraine. According to Russian media outlets, the fire engulfed fuel tanks and a thick column of black smoke rose across the city. The situation is under the control of the firefighters and all our services are working, Razvozhev said, adding that no one was injured. Due to the large volume of fuel, it will take a long time to localize the fire. Thousands of residents around the area were ordered to evacuate in case the fire was carried by the wind to nearby residential areas. Russian police and military check random papers on the street. Some houses were ransacked. Ukraine has repeatedly stated its intention to retake the Crimean Peninsula, which Russia illegally annexed in 2014 in the face of international outcry. The Ukrainian military did not immediately respond to a request for comment on Saturday. Razvozeyev reported on Monday that the Russian military destroyed a Ukrainian maritime drone boat, which he described as attempting to attack the harbor in the first hours, and a drone. The second drone exploded. He said the explosions broke windows in several apartment buildings but did not cause any other damage. It was the latest in a series of attacks on Sevastopol, the main naval base of Russia's Black Sea Fleet. After previous attacks on Sevastopol and other regions, Ukrainian officials have not publicly claimed responsibility, saying only that Ukraine has the right to strike any target in response to Russian aggression. Saturday's attack is considered a disastrous attack after the one that cost Putin billions of dollars. It should also be recalled that an explosion took place in Dzhankoi in the temporarily invaded Crimea. The explosion destroyed hundreds of Kalibr cruise missiles that were in transit by rail. This news was confirmed by a spokesman of the Intelligence Service of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, or SBU, for short, during a press conference at the Kyiv Press Center on the morning of Tuesday, March 21. An explosion in the city of Dzhankoi in the north of the temporarily invaded Crimea destroyed the Russian Kalibr NK cruise missile during rail transit, Vadim Skibitsky said. Local sources said that on the evening of March 20, explosions rocked the town of Dzhankoi in the northern part of the Crimean Peninsula, which was temporarily occupied by Russian troops. The destructive force was so great that the windows of many buildings in the town shattered, and residents described their experience as a lingering earthquake. The train exploded. The escorting Russian soldiers were probably all dead when the train exploded. Resuscitation capabilities were stalled because the rockets did not explode at the same time, one activating the other. The smoke was dense and high like a house with at least 5 floors. The Russian-made Crimea governor Sergei Aksionov confirmed the explosions and said evacuation efforts were underway, but gave no further details, nor repeated the usual chorus of its systems. The air defense system has been activated. Dzhankoi, a rail and road hub north of Crimea, 50 miles south of mainland Ukraine, was a key node in Russia's supply network before September, when Ukrainian forces launched an offensive counterattack that eventually liberated much of southern Ukraine occupied by Russia. 2. Intelligence Bulletin of the UK Department of Defence Intelligence. In the latest intelligence report, the UK Department of Defence Intelligence said the following. At dawn on April 28, 2023, Russia launched its first major cruise missile strike against Ukraine since early March 2023. Although Ukraine shot down most of the missiles, at least 25 civilians were killed. The attacks show a separation in Russia's use of long-range attacks. The new wave involves fewer missiles than the winter ones and does not appear to be targeting Ukraine's energy infrastructure. There is a real possibility that Russia is trying to intercept Ukrainian reserve units and military supplies that have recently been supplied to Ukraine. Russia operates an ineffective offensive process and prioritizes military necessity over preventing related property damage, including civilian deaths. 3. Former U.S. commander in Europe commented that Ukraine will take back from Russia a series of important territories. Newsweek has an article titled "Ukraine will regain significant territory from Russia." Ex-U.S. commander, meaning former U.S. commander in Europe, commented that Ukraine will retake from Russia important territory. Ukraine will take back important territory from Russia in a much-anticipated counteroffensive, a former U.S. Army general has argued. In a Twitter post on Thursday, Mark Hertling, who served as the commander-in-chief of the U.S. Army in Europe and the 7th Army, commented on Ukraine's counteroffensive to recapture the territories occupied by the U.S. Army. How the Russian occupation might play out. Satellite images show that Russian forces have built thousands of new defensive positions in strategically important areas in preparation for a Ukrainian counteroffensive expected in the next few weeks or months. Although I am a former U.S. commander, I am also very confident that the Ukrainian army will regain important territory and defeat the Russians in the spring offensive, but it will be a war. It's a tough fight, and it's not over yet, not yet. Ukrainian officials have remained tight-lipped about when or where their upcoming counteroffensive will begin. Retired U.S. Marine Colonel Mark Kanchan, senior advisor to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, previously told Newsweek that he predicts a Ukrainian spring offensive could begin. Head in Zaporizhia, one of 4 regions of Ukraine that Russian President Vladimir Putin announced to have annexed in September 2022. The expectation is that the Ukrainians will launch an attack to defend somewhere around the Zaporizhzhia area there or to the east, maybe towards Mariupol or the coast, Khanchin said. I would think about, can the Ukrainians break through the Russian lines and cross them into the open space to use the mobility capabilities they have built? This is a lot like a World War I problem, he said. Khanchin said the Russians had built a very strong front line. Every day we see pictures of it, with dragon teeth, fortifications and everything else. If the Ukrainians are stopped in there or caught up in the defenses, that will be very uncomfortable and there will be problems. But if they can break through and use their tanks in the open, then they can really capture a lot of territory, Khanchin said. Ukraine's counteroffensive should begin quite abrupt. They are in the same position as the French in World War I, that is, they have an opponent invading their territory, and the stalemate is in effect, so they have to make a move. Attack, and they need to not rush this spring. But if they don't, I think both the people and their supporters will be very disappointed, Khanchin added. Newsweek has reached out to the Russian Foreign Ministry by email for comment. 4. Ukraine's defense minister gives an update on counterattacks. Newsweek had a report titled Ukraine Defense Minister Gives Update on Counteroffensive, which means Ukraine Defense Minister's Update on Counteroffensive. Ukraine's Defense Minister Alexei Reznikov announced on Friday that preparations for Ukraine's upcoming counteroffensive are in the final stages. During a press conference in the Ukrainian capital Kyiv, Reznikov gave an update on a much-anticipated counteroffensive in the coming weeks or months. Ukraine says it aims to recapture territories that have been occupied by Russian forces throughout the conflict. Just in case, satellite images show that Russian forces have built thousands of new defensive positions in strategically important areas. Reznikov said Ukrainian soldiers are being trained to use weapons and military equipment provided by Western allies. Preparations are coming to an end, because in addition to weapons and military equipment, our servicemen must be trained in how to use them. We have received state-of-the-art systems, the defense minister told reporters. According to Reznikov, the American-made Abrams tank will not arrive in Ukraine in time for the counterattack. The United States says it will deliver M1A1 Abrams tanks to Ukraine in the fall. The Pentagon's press secretary, Brigadier General Pat Ryder, told reporters last month that the tanks will be equipped with 120mm cannon and 50mm heavy machine gun, as well as advanced armor. Let me remind you that in addition to the tank alliance, mainly composed of Leopard 2 and Challenger tanks, with Leopard 1s coming later, we are also waiting for Abrams. However, I don't think Abrams will be used in this counterattack. But our crews are already on the road for training, said Reznikov. We also have many armored vehicles of all kinds, especially armored personnel carriers and infantry fighting vehicles. We have Bradleys, Martyrs, Strykers and CV-90s from Sweden. We are completing some more training there. Mr. Reznikov said Ukrainian forces are currently being trained to use equipment that the country has received to assist in the ongoing conflict with Russia. But let's say in a general sense, we're more ready than ever, he added. Newsweek has reached out to the Russian Foreign Ministry by email for comment. Ukraine's defense minister announced on April 19 that Ukraine had received Patriot surface-to-air missile defense systems from Western allies. A day earlier, Germany was the first country to announce that it had delivered Patriot systems and missiles to Ukraine. The US and the Netherlands also pledged to send surface-to-air missile systems to Ukraine months ago. Today, our beautiful Ukrainian skies are safer because the Patriot air defense systems have reached Ukraine. Our air defenses mastered them as quickly as they could. And our partners have kept their word, Reznikov wrote on Twitter. Reznikov said on Friday that the equipment it received would be an iron fist against Russia. 5. The Ukrainian Defense Forces repelled 48 waves of Russian attacks in 4 directions. Putin's troops continued to suffer heavy losses on the way to evacuate. During a press conference at the Kyiv Press Center on Saturday afternoon, April 29, spokesman for the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine Brigadier General Alexei Hromov said that in the past 24 hours, the Ukrainian Defense Forces repelled 48 attacks by the invaders. Strategies on the 4 directions: Lyman, Bakhmut, Avdiivka and Mariinka. In the last 24 hours, they have carried out 48 attacks on the aforementioned areas of the front. In it, Bakhmut and Mariinka remained the focus of the wars. The defenders heroically maintained the defense lines. In the past day, the Air Force's Air Defense Force had 5 sorties in the invaders' areas, and rocket and artillery units attacked 4 military bases, command, an ammunition depot, and 4 enemy manpower clusters. In the last 24 hours, 580 Russian soldiers have been eliminated from the battle along with 3 tanks, 3 armored vehicles, 3 artillery systems and 17 troop and fuel transport vehicles. In total, from February 24, 2022 to April 29, 190,040 Russian troops were eliminated from the battle. Total enemy combat losses included 3,697 tanks, 7,184 armored vehicles, 2,908 artillery systems, 543 mass-launched missile systems, 294 air defense systems, 308 aircraft, 294 helicopters, and 2,471 aircraft. Pilots, 932 cruise missiles, 18 warships, 5,836 troop and fuel transport vehicles, and 355 special equipment units. 6. Has the Ukrainian counteroffensive started yet? The media in the capital Kyiv asserted that the counteroffensive had begun in southern Ukraine, specifically in the eastern Kherson region. However, President Zelensky said that media coverage of the Ukrainian counterattack did not help his army. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said he believes media reports about an upcoming Ukrainian counteroffensive are not helping the Ukrainian military, but they will not affect Ukraine's plans. He said this in interviews with representatives of Finnish, Swedish, Danish and Norwegian media outlets. The counterattack does not depend only on combat vehicles. Combat vehicle or armored vehicle is one of the elements of an offensive operation. Sometimes, as I told you, there are information threats. And I will tell you frankly that, unfortunately, sometimes there is information that is not true, not only published in the Russian press, and I believe that such information does not help. Honestly, would such information stop us? No, it won't stop us. Even if it is published daily. All this will not stop us, we will still go ahead and definitely win, he said. At the same time, he noted that regardless of whether the information is false or true, disseminating it doesn't help. Zelensky also said he believes in the Ukrainian soldiers, and that it is Ukraine's duty to move forward. There were many saying that the Russians would immediately flee after we started our counterattack. Well, I wish there were fewer victims among them. Ukraine's Defense Minister Alexei Reznikov earlier said expectations for a counterattack by the Ukrainian armed forces were a little too hot. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba stated that the Ukrainian counteroffensive can only be considered the last battle after it is over and if it leads to the complete liberation of Ukrainian territory. 7. Zelensky says grain import bans by some EU countries are destructive and bring dangerous hope to the Kremlin. President Volodymyr Zelensky discussed what he called the destructive effect of several European countries' ban on imports of Ukrainian grain. The bans are imposed on the grounds that imports are lowering the domestic prices of other countries. He said on Friday that he had discussed the matter with the President of the Council of the European Union, Charles Michel. I stress that this not only violates the existing association agreement between Ukraine and the European Union, but also gives dangerous hope to the Kremlin. Hopefully, in our common European home, someone's wrong decisions can prevail over the common good. Zelensky added, it is necessary to find a normal, constructive way to get out of this situation in a European spirit. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky also offered condolences to the victims of Russian missile attacks across the country on Friday. People are still trapped under the rubble in Yemen. Unfortunately, there are casualties, including children. Zelensky said a child was killed after shelling on Dnipro in central Ukraine, adding, "My condolences to all those who have lost loved ones to Russian terrorism." Attacks were reported in the central Ukrainian cities of Dnipro, Uman in the Cherkasy region, and the city of Ukrainka, located about 45 kilometers south of the capital Kyiv. This Russian terrorist must face a fair response from Ukraine and the world. And it will be responsible for these crimes. Every such attack, every act of evil against our country and people brings the terrorist state closer to defeat and punishment. 8. Zelensky asks Xi Jinping to help bring kidnapped children back to Russia. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said this week he appealed to Chinese leader Xi Jinping to help repatriate Ukrainian children abducted by Russia. Zelensky shared the new details of the phone call, held on Wednesday, during a joint press conference with the presidents of Slovakia and the Czech Republic on Friday. Zelensky said he used important conversation to raise the plight of some 20,000 Ukrainian children Kyiv accused Russia of abducting by force. The Ukrainian president said other countries, including China, needed to help Ukraine bring the children home. So far, only Ukraine is helping Ukraine bring the children back, Zelensky said. A report released in February by the Yale University Center for Humanitarian Studies outlined the expanding network of camps where Russia has allegedly been holding Ukrainian children since the start of the war last year. In March, the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant for Russian President Vladimir Putin and another Kyiv official, Maria Lvova-Belova, accusing them of playing a key role in the scheme. Zelensky's call, which comes at a time when the West is increasingly watching China's relationship with Russia. Putin and Xi posed as peace brokers during a recent visit to Moscow, but the Chinese leader's proposals for ending the war did not include a call for Moscow to withdraw its troops. Ukrainian territory. Zelensky said Wednesday's call included a discussion about Ukraine's territorial integrity. The Ukrainian leader said he also received a positive response from China after outlining the risks faced by any country supplying arms to Russia. U.S. officials have warned in recent months that China may be considering crossing a red line and providing lethal military aid to Russia. While the two countries have strengthened ties, U.S. officials say they see no evidence that China has provided extensive material support to the Kremlin. 9. Building in Bakhmut with famous mural of family destroyed. A tall building with a famous mural depicting a smiling family has been demolished in the besieged Ukrainian city of Bakhmut in recent days, according to CNN geolocation video. Footage on Telegram shows an explosion at night and then smoke rising from the structure. While the building with the mural of a woman and baby wearing a crown made of leaves appears to have been destroyed, the mural of a man and a boy holding a toy plane remains. 10. Putin signed a decree authorizing the expulsion of Ukrainians from the invading regions of Ukraine. Putin signed a decree on Thursday allowing the expulsion of Ukrainian citizens from territories claimed by Russia if they are deemed a national security threat. According to the decree published online, residents from the annexed territories of Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson who have not yet acquired Russian citizenship will be considered foreigners. The ordinance says they can be deported from their residence if deemed to pose a threat to national security, including where residents are accused of advocating a violent change, force in the constitutional order of the Russian Federation, planning or financing terrorist attacks or extremist crimes. In September 2022, Putin announced that Russia would illegally occupy almost 20% of Ukraine's area under international law, including 4 regions, some of which are not even under full control of Russia. It took place after the so-called referendums in regions considered a sham by Ukraine and Western nations. The decree also stipulates that Ukrainians living in such areas who do not hold Russian passports will have to apply for a residence permit. They will have to register their fingerprints and provide a package of documents translated into Russian. Ukrainian officials have repeatedly said that people living in areas invaded by Russia are being denied services as they do not have Russian documents. Responding to the latest decree, Mikhailo Podolyak, an advisor to the chief of staff to the president of Ukraine, said, "The invader has occupied part of foreign territory, killed a number of civilians and is throwing force by force others out of their homes, not a few but thousands. Just because they don't want to be citizens of the murder country." The process of changing the ethnic composition of the territories where Russians are resettling is taking place. This is a clear manifestation of the genocidal nature of the war, Podolyak wrote on Twitter. In March, the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant for Putin and a Russian official for plotting to kidnap Ukrainian children to Russia.